Good morning. Good morning, good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are. I just wanted to share today some insights I had, or some breakthroughs I actually had with the client yesterday around snacking and emotional eating. And I haven't spoken about emotional eating for a while in this group, even though it's actually a lot of what I do with working with people, with particularly women, around their relationship with food and how we interact with food. And often there's a lot of there's this love-hate relationship with food. And I'll just share with you first of all my story around this client, but there's some big things with emotional eating that I think a lot of us don't realize, and whether we identify it as emotional eating or we might be like just calling it snacking, because this particular client yesterday was referring to snacking, not emotional eating. And she's like, yeah, and we've been working on this for a little while, just around, the habits, and we get into these habits, and particularly mums I work with their kids, and having to organise food for their children, and then they will start snacking on the kids' food. And often when our nervous system is in alarm, so when we're in that state of fight or flight, snacking, I don't know if anyone knows, if you can relate to this, is often used through your day. Who procrastinates through eating? Like, I know I am definitely, if I don't regulate my nervous system, can be very much guilty of that, of using food as a distraction. And it's often a form of procrastination. You go to the fridge, or you stare in the fridge, or stare in the cupboard and go, what's in there for me to eat? When really it's actually a way of distracting ourselves. But here's what I want you to know. Procrastination is actually a form of protection. And so it's a survival mechanism as part of our nervous system when we are in that state of fight or flight. And a lot of the time that survival mechanism is to freeze or to not feel our feelings, because procrastination is a freeze state. So it's a combination of being in alarm and also that nervous system response of actually freezing, where you just go into shutdown because it's not safe. And this usually will link back to particular experiences, or how we actually learn to cope, often as children, and always as children usually. And we learn to either procrastinate or freeze, because the procrastination is a freeze response, because that keeps us safe. And the problem is that we then judge the crap out of the procrastination or the habit that we're doing, whereas we're actually doing something that our nervous system has learned. Our brain is wired in that way to survive, and gone, okay, well, if this has worked to keep me alive, because that's the primal intention of our nervous system, and the primal instinct intention is to keep us safe, to keep us alive, so we don't die, right? And so if we weren't allowed to express emotions as children, or they were made wrong, often we will not want to feel those feelings. And this is where, it can be then going, okay, well, I'm going to distract myself from eating food, because I'm going to distract myself by eating food or going and eating things, because it is actually helping me to not feel my feelings. Yes? And when we are also in alarm, we're in that state of fight or flight, we make higher levels of cortisol, and we actually need quick energy. So when we're in a state of alarm and we're not feeling safe in our own bodies, and it could be this background alarm that's going on, and we're in a little bit of that hypervigilant state, if that keeps going on for a long time, we actually need sugar hits, because our body wants quick energy, and sometimes having a burst of cortisol there's healthy amounts of cortisol can be okay if it's needed, but when it's constant exposure to stresses that aren't actually threatening our life, but our body is reacting the same way, we need sugar. And so there's this then that is also an indicator of a dysregulated nervous system. So sometimes craving or snacking can be, it's an indicator of what's happening in your nervous system. And so rather than judging the crap out of it, actually understand that the procrastination or the things that you're doing at the moment that you know are currently not serving you and actually self-sabotaging is actually protection. And I want you to think about that if you're watching this. It's like, how does that feel in your body when you actually start to view that as protection rather than going, oh my God, and the judgment and the shame of why can't I just control myself? Like, what's wrong with me? Right? And so the other part of emotional eating, this is what came up with my client yesterday, was she's like, oh, well, it's boredom. But when we ever say the word boredom, like I want to go snack out of habit, out of boredom, but boredom is a word that we often use when we're dissociated. I'm bored because I don't want to feel, I'm going into this default mode of being bored because I need dopamine. And we're all dopamine addicts, and we the part of our brain where there's pleasure and pain is actually the same part of our brain. And that dopamine hit is the reward system. Shush. The dopamine part of our brain is actually, like, the dopamine hit is very addictive. We're all dopamine addicts. And so when we're bored, it's often because we're looking for that next dopamine hit. People with ADHD do this a lot because they're addicted to the dopamine hit because they're constantly looking for the dopamine. All right, I'm looking at my dog in the background going, he wants to get up. No, it's not going to happen. So that's number one, is that the physiological emotional response of procrastination, if this is connected to your emotional eating or your snacking or your habits around food, is protection. It's a survival state. It's reflecting the state of your nervous system. Number two is we actually often associate also food with love. So this is the other part to the session I did yesterday with my client. I was like, okay, can you go into a moment where, I was like, go into the moment where you wanted to snack. And I want you to feel it in your body. And I got her to drop in, I got her to feel the feelings in her body. And then I said to her, okay, how old do you feel? And she said, I feel 5. And I said, what's happening? And she said, my dad used to go to the bakery and bring home sweet treats. And I said, okay. And so often food, we associate food with love. And a lot of the time, and I think I may have actually said that to her prior to her finding that scene, because a lot of the time we will have this association with certain foods that will actually allow us to feel love, because that is how we were actually rewarded as children. So I've had clients in the past where I've worked with them and they're like, going to McDonald's was a treat, and it was how we spent time, quality time with my dad or with my mum. This is the same with shopping addictions. I've seen, like shopping, buying nice things, like that dopamine hit again. But the connection between food is then our brain is actually also connecting sugar and love. And that dopamine, it's a double dopamine hit of when I have sugar, I feel love, because that is how I felt loved as a child. And so I actually got her to connect and have a conversation with this version, and this little 5-year-old girl who I was like, let's have a conversation with her about sugar is not love. Dad loves you anyway, regardless. what do you really want to do? And she ended up saying, yeah, she just wants to play. She wants dad to play with her. And she realized the realization in this, and I will post her post because she posted it in the client group with her permission. I will post it below so you can see, but it's like she actually realized she's got a son who's the exact same age, and she realized that that's what he wants. And so rather than rewarding with food, she's actually going to make more of an effort to be present with her son and play with him than just giving him treats and rewarding him that way, because that's actually what children really want. And so when we distract ourselves from eating, it's a distraction from these uncomfortable feelings and wanting to feel these loving feelings. Because if we're feeling feeling shame or guilt or feeling lonely, we'll then go, okay, what can I do to fill this void? And this is all on the subconscious. This is not on the conscious level, because if it was conscious, we would be able to change it. This is deep in the body, and you can think it, but then you sometimes feel, who's ever like walked to the cupboard and felt like you're on autopilot? I'm like, yes, because this is your autonomic nervous system actually taking over, and your subconscious going, I'm going to go and get sugar. Yeah. And not even talking about the biochemical aspects of cravings, because when we have deficiencies and all those things as well, that impacts it, right? I'm just purely talking about the nervous system today. So how do we receive love as a kid? And was that association with food? And food is really interesting, because when we do associate food. You think of all our celebrations, like christenings, baby showers, weddings, catch-ups, barbecues, like everything is connected with food. And so food is very emotional for us. It's just that also, if we don't learn how to give those feelings, that love, that security, that safety, that reassurance to ourselves, we then go looking for it on the outside. And we will go and use food in particular to numb ourselves or to fill that void. Yes? And so that is the biggest thing, is often we have this association with food and love. And I was, when I was doing the session yesterday, I was like, well, for me, it's like there's some foods that I never eat now, but if I did have them, there would be a strong association. Like, for example, Dairy Milk Top Deck chocolate. I have clear memories, and also white chocolate. Being with my dad and having white chocolate. Like, there was a reno happening at my house when I would have been about 4, and I remember him bringing the white chocolate out and us eating white chocolate outside on the deck. Like, I remember that. It's so clear for me. And I used to associate that, and the only reason I would eat white chocolate is because of that connection. I don't really like it. It's too sweet for me. But that's what I remember. And same with Top Deck. Yeah, funnily enough. So there are certain things that we've got to start to question how we do reward our children and ourselves with food and our association with food, because if we always make that reward through food, then we're going to grow up wanting to also continually reward ourselves with food rather than other ways. And whether that be quality time or doing something fun and, or physical touch. There's other ways that we can reward our children, reward the people around us, reward ourselves, that isn't actually also always orientated with food. And I think that's really important. And so start to look at the way that you do now reward yourself. Is it, and even the language that you use, the language, it's just a treat. People use this language a lot. Just a treat, and treats are always naughty foods. Yes. And I catch it, just, like that association. I remember when my mum was in hospital with a brain tumor. This is now 4 and a bit years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, actually, more than that. when she first got diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I was in Canberra Hospital, and I had a lot of people come and visit, like family and friends, and there was this constant going to the cafe, and my dad and I wanting to go to escape, to get out, to go for a walk, to get out of the room. Let's go have coffee. And I actually started this coffee habit as a result of, I started this coffee habit and this addiction to coffee as a result of having this association, because it actually was a distraction. It was dopamine, made me feel good in the moment, but it was also nice having people come and visit, to be able to talk in that coffee and in that environment in the cafe. And yeah, it was a warm hug for me at the time, which is what I really needed. And so then I got out of the hospital environment and I went back to work. And I remember also going and coffee is a big one as well, right? Going to walk into the cafe with my friends, and I just started to go because I wanted to get out of the office. There was this sense of wanting to connect with those people, and I got that from walking to the cafe every day with my friends, and enjoyed that moment, and enjoyed the warm hug, and enjoyed flirting with the barista, and enjoyed there's so many aspects to it, and there's so many emotional connections that we make with food and beverages, right? And I love hate. And so we've got to start to look at our own behaviors, look at how we're rewarding ourselves, and this is where it comes to looking at your own. And sometimes we need guidance, right? The third part is if we want to, and the third thing you must know is, if we want to work through these emotional habits and move away from these patterns that we know are not serving, we have to learn to actually go into the feelings. We have to learn to get into the body somatically. That means feeling. We have to learn to not be scared of feeling the discomfort, feeling the pain, because this is not a way, it's not something that you can actually think your way out of. You've got to be able to feel your way out of. And this is the bit that is really challenging, and where we often need guidance, because we have blind spots that we can't see, and we need to be made accountable and be guided through these, because doing this yourself, when those patternings are so deep, so unconscious, so embedded in our neural pathways in our nervous system, that to create the change, we need an outside view and someone to guide us through that, because we can't see it ourselves because we have blind spots, and we've all got them. Yes, I need guidance. I need people to guide me through our blind spots. We've all got blind spots, right? And so this is also coming down to learning how to regulate your nervous system into this space of feeling safe in your own body, so that you're also not in that constant state of alarm, in that state of fight or flight, where you are then having huge surges of cortisol, and this pattern of cortisol where you are then wanting to feel need quick sugar from a biological, a biochemical. You actually need the quick energy. And so as we learn to regulate ourselves, help ourselves feel safe and connected through certain tools and techniques, we can then actually start to go through and get into the body and feel the discomfort and change our relationship with those uncomfortable feelings. Because a lot of the time we cut ourselves off from our body and we go up into the head, and that's when the chatter starts. That's when the overthinking starts. That's when the self-judgment and the shame continually goes in the loop. If when you're on a loop and it goes and goes and goes, it means you're in your head and you're not in your body. And if we want to start to work through these habits and start to create new ones, we need to first of all learn to connect to ourselves in a different way and start to have a different relationship with ourselves, have a different conversation with ourselves, so that we can actually carve out new neural pathways and create a sense of calm and certainty for ourselves, And it's a very different construct to the way that we have been operating up until this point. Yeah. And so this is the power of having someone to guide you through this, because emotional eating is really hard. And this is in general, you know, like we can know all the things to do, all the practical tools, but the bit where most people get stuck is I get in my own way because I've got these blind spots I can't see, or I have these patternings, and why do I do that? It's like, yeah, because your nervous system is an alarm. You have these default mechanisms and these default behaviors because up until this point it has worked, it has served, it serves as protection. And we've got to, like, it's very challenging to do it on your own. You can't actually do it on your own. You know, you can do it to a certain point cognitively, but it's like learning to get into the body and feel, and learn to feel this discomfort. And a lot of this is also coming down to, I get a lot of my clients to change their relationship with pain and discomfort and their emotions actively, and are often choosing things that are uncomfortable in your day or are going to push you a little bit, so that you get used to going to your edge and going to the edge and coming back and going to the edge and coming back. And your edge slowly over time does expand, and you actually grow greater capacity, but you cannot do that when your nervous system is in full alarm. You have to actually start to create calmness and safety in your own body. And so that is how you start to unravel and deconstruct the very complex topic and issue and struggle that a lot of us have with food, and the emotional connection we have with food and our habits. And even if we know that it's not serving, we're just like, why can't I stop? Well, this is why. So if you've got any questions about that, please let me know. Just to give you some insight, you know, what I'm talking about is, this is a bottom-up approach, not a top-down. And a lot of the time when we've gone to personal development or therapy, certain different courses or modalities, a lot of the time we're just talking about our issues, or we're trying to think our way out of certain problems. But it must be done the other way around. This is the biggest distinction that I've learned, and the biggest distinction with now how I work with people that I work with in my program, is the distinction of it has to be done a different way, and that needs to be done from the bottom up, not the top down. Yes, you can't feel your way out of a thinking problem at all, period. And most of us, that's what most of us are trying to do. And this is a feeling problem. Emotional eating is a feelings that we are usually trying to avoid or get that dopamine hit. And there are the patterns that need to be rewired. So I would love to know, what's your biggest takeaway? What's your struggle if you've gotten all the way to the end of this? What's your struggle with emotional eating? You know, what is it? Is it either salty or sweet? You know, I've done other videos in this group on cravings as well. Let me know if you've got any questions, and I hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you all soon. Ciao, guys.